There in front of me, I'm sorry. You need a book? Okay, all right. We've went through quite a few subjects in our study of stewardship, and one of the things that we're ultimately going to get into, we've talked about our time, our ability, the souls that's in our hands. This morning we're going to study lesson number 6, which is a historical background of giving. And beforehand, I want to apologize to you. I don't see any way to do this first part other than just kind of read with you. There's no scripture to reference to. All of the information here is there's not really any reason for me to try to memorize it when it's right here in the book. But then we'll do the main part of our discussion over on page 31, section F. But as far as the earliest background of giving, most of the people that we have studied about in the Bible has to do with what was the method that they used for giving. Tithing. Now, I want to impress something on you that is a ancient and Old Testament method of giving of our means. The New Testament is giving freely as we've prospered, and but to set the tone for how we should give, we're going to spend just a little bit of time looking at the historical background of giving. The aim of this lesson is to learn what people in the ancient world did in regard to giving their possessions to their gods. We're concerned with pagan nations as well as people who worshiped Jehovah God. We have to keep in mind that even people that didn't believe in the God of heaven still had things that they believed in. And if you go back early enough, it's kind of like religion is today. You know, when the Reformation started and there was this big split from the Catholic Church, everybody said, we need to get away from Catholicism. And they said, yeah, we agree, but we don't agree with what you're thinking. And so what happens is we end up moving away from the actual, some of the falsifications that the Catholic Church had put in to religion as man-produced practices. And out comes these other denominations, but they also carried with them things like bishops and archbishops, but they're not part of the Catholic Church, but they're similar to it. So the people in history that were not worshiping the God of heaven still went back to their traditions from a long, long time ago. Our memory verse this morning that we've been given is Hebrews 7:4. Now consider how great this man was, unto whom even the patriarch Abraham gave the tenth of the spoils. That's a long time ago. Okay, in section 1, the practice of ancient pagan nations. Is this too loud? Are y'all okay with it? Definitions. By pagan nation, we mean those nations that do not worship the God of the Bible. Rather, they worship idols and other creations of their minds and hands. And by tithe, we mean the 10th part of anything appropriated as tax or sacrifice. The one thing that I want to cover as we get toward the center part of our lesson is even in tithing, in the Old Testament practices, if you consider that to your modern day giving habits, we need to understand that let's say that if a person, just to simplify it, and I hope we're all worth more than this, but let's just say that our net worth is $1,000. I don't think he's talking about giving a tenth of your $1,000. That's your sustaining economy. But yet, if you go out and, according to the rules and practices of tithing, if you go out and you earn $400, I think that tithing practice is to be bound to that part. Otherwise, if somebody that is sitting at home and can't work, their net worth's going to go down 10% every year until there's nothing there. So I don't think that's what he's talking about. God blesses all of us. He even blesses those that are not faithful. He put, we've read where he sends rain to the just and the unjust. So just because somebody doesn't belong to the church of the Lord doesn't mean that God still doesn't pour his blessings out. But of course, the eternal destiny of those people are contingent upon their ability to understand and put together their thoughts on what God has told them to do. And tithing is not something that is generally considered applicable to our life today because of the second, I think it's 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 5 through 7. But we'll get to that shortly. Sources of information. Archaeologists have found clay tablets in the ruins of cities from Egypt to Babylon. The picture writings of Egypt, the cuneiform tablets of Babylon, the clay tablets of Assyria and Egypt are sources of information. Man has been able to decipher writings found on walls in royal tombs, in ancient buildings, and in coffins. Historians and other early writers of Rome and Greece give information, including Herodotus, Pliny, Hesiod, and others. I can't imagine wanting to send somebody a letter and having to do it on a clay tablet and sit there and smooth it out nice. And actually, the cuneiform is one of the oldest forms of writing, and it means wedge-shaped. Just about everything I looked up considered it wedge-shaped. So I guess all of their symbols had something to do with some sort of triangle or something. People used it with a reed stylus. So they didn't have anything else. So I guess to them that was the only way that they could do it. Section C, what are some findings? In Egypt, many ancient Egyptians were conscientious in giving. Found among Egyptian writings, I have not cut short the rations of the temples. I have not diminished the offerings of the gods, and I have not stolen the property of the gods. Ancient Nile Valley inhabitants dedicated the first fruits of their harvest to their gods. They gave a tenth of slaves, cattle, precious metals, and even fields, towns, and provinces were allotted to gods. The claims of the gods had to be satisfied before those of men. As time goes on, we're going to be confronted with that same statement right there. The claims of the gods had to be satisfied before those of men. We'll talk about that in just a few minutes. In Babylon, Babylonians evidently supported temples by contributing obligatory and voluntary and by tithes paid by all classes of people. They evidently paid tithes by 2100 BC. These tithes were of annual income, fruits of the ground, profits from merchants, spoils of war, portions of tribute, and other incomes. Notice the word there is incomes. So even if a soldier is in battle and he goes over and we do things now differently. When we go into unless you're not civilized, I guess. When an army goes into a town, they do it to seize control of that town. They don't go in and seize control of that town and then steal everything the people have got. Well, back then they did do that. Otherwise, they could make war again against them. So what they did was they considered that as an increase in their life. So some people were told to give of their spoils of war. Somebody gives you something that's a valuable thing, like you inherit a lot of money or something. Even back then, they considered that something that could be tithed. And as far as Greece is concerned, the Greeks apparently paid tithes to gods before they supported their kings. Boy, you can't do that today, can you? King wants his support, and he's going to get it one way or the other. If you don't get it, you're going to pay a penalty for not getting it. And then you're going to pay interest on the penalty and what you didn't give him. But they paid tithes to their gods before they supported kings. Anyone who would not give first fruits to gods should be destroyed, they said. It is said that Greek youths would dedicate their tithes to a god of war who had taught them to be good soldiers. There was a time, I guess, and not I guess, I know it is, when the Roman armies and Grecian armies they had superior combat experience, and it was a big deal to be a part of the military. And there were blessings from it. Like I just said, you go into a town that's pretty well off and you find you a pot of gold, you can keep it. In Rome, many Romans, rich and poor, made vows unto some god, usually Hercules, to give him a tenth of all. This included the farmer with his produce, the commander with spoils of war, even to sacrificing cattle taken in war. Today we live in a cash and credit society, so some of these things that we read about here, when an army goes off and it's got this many weapons, and when it comes back it's got this many plus this many weapons, and it's got all these cattle and all these goods and clothes, then Saul, he decided there were some things that was just too good to destroy, and he brought them back, and it cost him. But anyway, that's a form of gain to these people. And a few quotations here. The picture writings of Egypt, the cuneiform tablets of Babylon, and early writers of Greece and Rome inform us that before the Bible was written, and apart therefrom, it was almost universal practice among civilized nations for people to pay tithes to their gods. But none tell us when or where the practice began or who issued the law for its observance. The payment of a tithe is a practice both ancient and widespread, being found among many peoples, Semitic and non-Semitic. I had to make sure I understood what that meant. I know when we hear today, you hear about anti-Semitic, you're talking about people that are against Jews. The definition of that also includes Arabs and Phoenicians, according to the dictionary. So there were people outside of that race that also paid tithes. Almost all nations of the earth have agreed in giving a 10th part of their property to be employed in religious uses. Herodotus says that Cyrus required his soldiers to devote a 10th of their booty to Zeus, and clay tablets of Assyria and Egypt tell of tithing 3,800 years before Christ. The institution of offering tithes dates back to a period greatly anterior to Israelite history, and pagan nations gave tithes to their deities even before the days of Abram. The Greeks divided the money raised from the sale of captives and of the 10th which they took out for Apollo and for the Ephesian Artemis. Added to these reference to China, India, Egypt, ancient Assyria, and Babylonia is the array of evidence commonly presented in writings on the tithe, including testimony from the Persians, Arabians, Phoenicians, Carthaginians, and various other African communities, the ancient Britons, the Grecians, and the Romans. I know that was kind of fast, but I feel like I'd rather spend more time in these scriptural matters, so I wanted to get through that pretty quick. Now that we're going to go into, on page 31, we're going to go into a summary of what we just talked about. The ancients made offerings to their gods, both required and voluntary. There was usually the practice of tithing. Purposes of these offerings were to appease anger of their gods, ward off danger, disease, and disaster, to vow to secure divine favor, and to redeem a vow, and to act in accordance with the law of the times as an expression of gratitude. I want to put some emphasis on, if you have your Bibles, turn to 2 Corinthians 9, and we'll talk about verse 5 through 7. Now, this is Paul in his writing to the Corinthian church. Therefore I thought it necessary to exhort the brethren that they would go before unto you, and make you beforehand your bounty, whereof ye had noticed before, that the same might be ready as a matter of bounty, and not as of covetousness. But this I say, he which soweth sparingly shall reap also sparingly, and he which soweth bountifully shall reap also bountifully. Every man according as he purposeth in his heart, so let him give, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loveth a cheerful giver. Only we can decide what we think our blessing has been. and want to clarify one thing. And I said this when we started the class. This is not just about how much we put in church. There might be something that you're doing outside of the church. I don't know, helping the poor, helping those that have lost their house, and you help them do something. You never can tell what people are going to do. There was a very good friend of mine that I used to play a lot of softball with. He played baseball at David Lipscomb, and he was all conference. As a matter of fact, he was drafted, but he decided he didn't want to do that. And so he wanted to stay involved with the church, and he didn't feel like he could do that by leaving and going to the pro baseball. But one Sunday in church, somebody comes running in, and you know, if we're sitting here listening and all of a sudden somebody comes in that door back there and is looking around like this, you're going, what on earth is going on? Well, and they went running to Steve, and he jumped up, and his wife jumped up, and his kids jumped up, and out the door they went, and that person went, and you're thinking, what's happened? Well, you think maybe something's happened to one of his folks or something. Well, he lived right down the road about 2 miles, and come to find out, his house was on fire. And by the time they got the fire department there, you know, it's kind of like being a fire. It's kind of like living somewhere up on top of Harrison Ferry Mountain. You know, it takes a while to get the fire companies up there. And he had a big 2-story frame house. It's real pretty. And by the time the fire department got there, it was just in total ruin. And I never felt so sorry for anybody in my life. And me and quite a few other people from the church, we went down there, and he was standing out there, and his wife was crying, his kids were crying, and you could tell he had been crying. And I handed him a pretty sizable check, because I loved him, and I felt like he's part of my family. And then somebody else did the same thing, and then somebody else did the same thing. And I'll never forget what his reaction was. He walked around and he shook his head and give me my check back, and he gave this and his check back, and he said, "I don't take charity." Well, but we were trying to do something to help him. Well, we didn't know he might have had a lot more money than we had. That didn't mean much to me, because I didn't have much. But that really struck a chord with me, that sometimes you can give people something, but you know, Christians, especially one Christian to another Christian, needs to understand that it's our duty to help each other, and when we offer to help you, we're just trying to exercise our Christianity. So let us, you know, don't not let us. Let us. It makes us feel good for us and for you, and it helps you. It helps us. It edifies you. It edifies us. But I never will forget that. So there are people that help people that are not even related to the church. But so when we're giving, you know, and nobody else knows whether you're being cooperative with the amount of blessings that you've received, whether or not you're doing all you can do. And that applies to all of us, including me. I mean, I've got to. It's you know, the economy is changing, and you know, inflation doesn't just affect us at the grocery store; it affects the church as well. So we need to remember that we have to support this church. God's not going to send a bucket of money down for us to go get at the post office. It's depending on, and I'm not being critical. I want you to know that. Matter of fact, I'll tell you this, not that it makes any difference, but in trying to come up with a basis for giving, I took an average of what I thought an average amount that we generally give here at Central. It's $35 a person. That includes the children. So, you know, when you figure 260 people, that includes the children that are in attendance. So this church gives well of its means, and it should be congratulated for that. But all I want to do is to just throw out what the Bible teaches, and you take it from there. That's right. Collection for the Jerusalem Jews. I told you about when I had my heart surgery, that my neighbors didn't ask them or anything. They just, I heard this noise, and I asked Kathy, I said, "Is Billy running a tractor out there?" And he's always running his tractor for something. And I looked out the window, and there's two of my neighbors mowing my yard. Now, you think I won't forget that? I will not forget that. But it cost them some gas, it cost them some time, it cost them some wear and tear on their mowers. But they were doing what they thought was right. I remember one time when we had just moved back here from Pennsylvania, and we're not from Pennsylvania, but I had a job up there for about 5 years, running a nursery up there. And when I got back, we started going to this church, and I thought, who in the world is that? And I went over and looked out the door, and here's this lady standing there, and I opened the door and I said, "Yes," and she said, just saw you people had moved into the community, and I just made some fresh bread and wanted to give you a loaf of it." Well, it was fresh. It was still warm. You know, she must have run right out of the kitchen after she took it out of the oven and brought it over there. That was nice. See, this is 25 years later, and I'm telling you about that. So that's the impact that things we do. It's not always about money. Sometimes there's somebody in this room right now, and I'm not going to say who, but there's somebody in this room right now. We just found it the other day when I was back from the hospital, gave me a gift card. And I appreciate that. Didn't expect it. But I won't forget that either. And I won't forget the people that I'm talking about either. Little things like that add up to our giving as we have prospered. It's not all about cash in the box. Cash in the box. Sometimes it's about cash we spend on groceries to give somebody that don't have any groceries. And that's the way it should be. In section F, part 2, however, these pagans were without Christ. The apostles, the Bible, the church, and the Great Commission. And shall we allow them to rise up in judgment and shame us because they gave to heathen gods more than we give to the God of the Bible? Now, I underline that because that's that's kind of a cheap shot, but it's the truth. I want to. We'll get into this in a whole lot of detail as the lessons go forward, but I want to emphasize one thing. You know, I told you about the man that I read from last week in that little gold book, A.M. Burton, saying that somebody asked him, you don't look like you've been giving too much. And he said, son, I can't, the Lord's shoveling it in faster than I can shovel it out. That's the way it works. But if you give thinking that, okay, wonder when my return's going to come, that's not the way it works. You will not suffer for giving to people and to helping the cause of Christ and helping those that are in need. But section G, how do we define pagan nations? What did we just study? That's right. They worship something, but they don't know, they don't worship God. You know, I can remember when we were in a study of the Egyptians in Egypt and their bondage, and when it came to talking about what the Egyptians worshipped, now this is hard for me to believe, but I believe it. But the Egyptians even believed in a god of the flies. Can you imagine that? They had a god for just about everything. Of course, we talked about when we define tithe, it's 10% of anything appropriated as tax or sacrifice. And what are some of the sources of information from pagan nations? Well, it's over here in 1 through 8 under quotations. And what are 5 purposes why ancient nations gave tithes to their gods? It's just right up there in the summary. As you said, to appease the anger of the gods and to seek divine favor. To them, the gods were divine. Acting in accordance with the laws of the times and an expression of gratitude. Now, in section 2, the Bible's patriarchal age, in Genesis 4, 1 through 5, and I'm not going to read that, but we're going to go into the questions. Cain and Abel sacrificed to God. Now, I used to have a problem with this, just as a younger man. So what did Cain offer to God? Huh? Fruit of the ground. Well, since he was a farmer, you know, I put 2 and 2 together, and I think, you know, that's what he would give, the fruits of what he has grown. And then what did Abel offer? He offered the firstlings of his flock and the fat thereof. It says in number 3, the Lord had respect unto Abel and his offering, and Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell. Now that always hurt my feelings when I read that. You know, he poor old Cain, looking at it from a younger man's standpoint, he brings his sacrifice. Now, y'all are going to think I'm crazy for saying this, but where we used to live in Joelton, Tennessee, where our house was about, I don't know, maybe from here out to the front of the end of the sidewalk from the street. And our boys would get off the bus, and here they would come, and they're just flapping their little lessons and drawings and things, and they wanted to show us. And I can remember Kathy. I never was much of a for saying, "Oh, that's beautiful." I never was one of those kind of people, but Kathy can really magnify that. And my whole family knows how I am, and they don't think nothing of it. But she'd go, that's beautiful. That's just absolutely beautiful. And she would say the same thing to the littlest one. And of course, she's patting them on the head and kissing them and all this. And I'm saying, that's good, that's pretty, bud. But in this case, it's almost like, in comparison, the two sons got off the bus and ran up, and God said, "Oh, your offering is so nice. Yours is ugly." And that's the way it resonated in my mind, and I thought, I feel so sorry for him. I can see why his countenance fell, but the reality is, and we don't know this, or we don't know it or don't know it, but there was the only logical reason why God rejected is because the forethought and appreciation for what he had was not present when he gave that sacrifice. Yes, sir. He just brought stuff. Well, it's certainly plausible that, I think the key to what you're saying is that Cain brought the first fruits of his flock. So he didn't just look out there and say, well, that one, it's got the little black place on his neck. Get that one. We don't want to look at that. No, he got the very best that he could find for his God. And as AJ said, it was the first fruits. Cain, I meant Abel is who I meant if I said Cain, but Cain did it more out of obligation probably than anything else. We're not told exactly, we're just told that God did not accept his sacrifice. Well, as brothers go, he gets attention, he don't. Well, guess who's mad at who? Grandchildren are that way. Well, children are, your own children are too. Without blemish. And not one time did he command them to give give whatever you can. It'll be all right. No, we're talking about the God of heaven, and he is not going to tolerate anything but their very best and our very best. So we need to always, as you're talking about, the very best is primary in every bit of the giving that we go. I remember a man talking one time, and he was talking about who in their right mind would take a big pile of leftovers to a family reunion, or take them to your mom or your daddy because they didn't have enough to eat. Just take that chili. Well, it's 3 days old. I know, but just take it anyway. We're not going to do that. We're going to fix them a nice big pot of chili because they're our mom and daddy, or our brother and sister, or somebody, brother and sister in Christ. But anyway, Cain is the example of how not to give, and Abel is the example of how to give. Do we know how much he gave? We don't know. In Genesis 8, verse 20, Noah sacrificed to God. What does this verse say that Noah built? An altar. And Noah offered burnt offerings on the altar. Abraham gave tithes to God's priest in Genesis 14, 18 through 20. Returning from successful battle, Abraham met Melchizedek. I can remember as a young kid thinking what a neat name that was, Melchizedek. Melchizedek was king of Salem and priest of the Most High God in Hebrews 7:11. As a gift to Abraham, Melchizedek brought forth bread and wine. Blessed be Abram of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. In Hebrews 7, verse 4, now consider how great this man was, unto whom even the patriarch Abraham gave the tenth of the spoils, which we've already read. Now, I want you to notice here in the last section, in Genesis 28, 20 through 22, Jacob asked God to be with him and to keep him in this way. He asked God to give him bread to eat and raiment to put on, and a new car once a year. No, you see the humble nature of Abraham and the humble approach he has to God? You know, a lot of our giving sometimes is based on what we think we need. And I may repeat this, but I want to tell you real quick before the bell rings. I was teaching this very same class to a church in Adams, Tennessee. And there was this one woman, I bet she had 6 daughters. And they all married real hard-working farmers, and they were all good boys. I played ball with most of them. And we were in class, and it was a well-known fact that it's right out there on the highway going into Guthrie. There's this big, huge house. Come to find out it was 4,500 square feet. Now, her husband worked and she worked. And I got to talking about we should make sure that we don't live above our means and don't do anything that would hinder our ability to do our part for God and for the church. And she said, do you think that women ought not work? And I said, now, I hate that you asked me that. I said, but you ask it, I'll tell you personally, I don't. Kathy never did, and that doesn't mean she's more better than somebody that did work. I'm just saying I didn't want her to work because I wanted my kids to be there when they come waving their little banners or whatever. And she said, Terry, you don't understand. I can't, if I don't work, I can't pay for my house note. And I said something that I shouldn't have said. Kathy got all over me, but it just dawned on me, and I said, well, maybe you shouldn't have built a 4,500 square foot house. So you see, my point is, when we do something, we need to go, how is this going to affect my ability to perform as a Christian financially? And I regret saying that, and I can't take it back. And I told her I was sorry, I wasn't trying to embarrass her. And she said, well, you're probably right. But I mean, it was a big house, great big house. Well, let's finish this. Has the bell rung? I saw a few people getting up. To what place did what place did Jacob want to come again? His father's house in peace. And of all that thou shalt give me, I will surely give the 10th unto thee. I don't think we can overstate that statement right there. Genesis 31:13, God reminded Jacob of this vow that God had taken. You're going to give, I'm going to give. And we need to remember that. I guess we'll close right there, since I've been going over every Sunday for the last 5-6 weeks. Next week we will talk about giving in the Jewish age, which is something we can all relate to a little bit better and have scripture to work on. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate our guest. She obviously either is kin to or likes Jill. Are you kin to Jill? No? Okay, well, you must like her then. We like her too. See you next Sunday morning.
Jesus, friend of children, never be a friend to me. Hold my hand and always keep me close to thee. The little flower that opens saved I am